Darkness. The battlefield is quiet, littered with shattered shields and broken spears. The air is heavy with the metallic sting of blood and the acrid scent of smoke. Suddenly, the silence is ripped apart, a violent snap of twisted sinew, a sound unlike anything else on the ancient battlefield. A heartbeat later, a spear the size of a small tree thunders through the air, tearing into the enemy ranks with bone-crushing force. Shields shatter like brittle wood. Men are thrown backward as if struck by the gods themselves. Panic erupts, and the enemy realizes they're facing something far deadlier than any sword or spear in Rome's arsenal. Narrator, low, tense, cinematic, this was not the work of ordinary soldiers. This was the power of a machine, an ancient invention engineered to kill at terrifying speed and range. The Romans called it the Ballista. To its victims, it was nothing short of a monster in wood and iron. Close your eyes and imagine it. A wall of disciplined legionaries advancing, shields locked, spears raised. You brace for the clash of men and steel. But then, before the first blade strikes, an invisible storm erupts. Bolts longer than a man's arm rain down, with such velocity, they pierce two soldiers at once. Stones the weight of a warhammer crash into tightly packed formations, crushing bones and morale alike. The sound of human screams is drowned out by the creak and release of the machine, a rhythm of mechanical death echoing across the valley. This was not just a weapon. It was terror given form, a calculated tool of Roman warfare, designed not only to kill, but to break the enemies well before the true fight even began. Shocking fact. In fact, some ancient historians claim that a single well-placed ballista bolt could split a man clean in half, and still have enough force left to impale the one standing behind him. Imagine the horror of facing such a weapon, knowing that nowhere on the battlefield was safe. Not behind your shield, not behind your comrades, not even behind your walls. But here is the true secret. The ballista was not a Roman invention. It was stolen, adapted, perfected, and made more ruthless than ever before. Rome took the designs of the Greeks, infused them with iron discipline, relentless engineering, and mass production. And in doing so, they turned a clever siege device into one of the deadliest battlefield machines of the ancient world. Narrator, voice tightening, suspenseful. So what exactly made the ballista so fearsome? Was it the raw, killing power of its bolts? The crushing weight of its stone projectiles? Or was it something deeper? The psychological warfare, the cold knowledge that Rome could strike you down from hundreds of feet away, long before you ever laid eyes on a legionary's sword. The truth is, the ballista was more than a machine. It was a statement. Every time Rome rolled one onto the field, it was a declaration to their enemies. Resistance is hopeless. Your walls are not tall enough. Your armor is not thick enough. Your courage is not strong enough. This was the genius of Roman warfare. Not just fighting battles, but mastering the art of breaking the enemy's spirit. The camera lingers on the aftermath. Twisted bodies pinned to the earth, shields skewered together like toys, rubble scattered where once there stood walls. The battlefield is silent again, but the silence now feels heavier. Oppressive, as if the shadow of the ballista itself still lingers in the air. Narrator, final build of tension. Rome's enemies called it unnatural, monstrous, a weapon no man should wield. And yet, the ballista became a cornerstone of Roman dominance, used to crush rebellions, topple fortresses, and terrify entire nations into submission. But here's the question. Pause. The sound of ropes tightening again, then silence, holding the viewer in suspense. Narrator, whisper, cliffhanger. How brutal was the ballista, really? Was it just another tool of war? Or was it the deadliest secret weapon of the Roman Empire? Backhand index pointing right. That's the hook. About 680 to 700 words. Pace for 30 to 45 seconds, if read, with cinematic narration and pauses. It opens with shocking imagery, gives a chilling fact, sets the historical context, and ends with a cliffhanger question. The year is the height of the Roman Republic, and across the Mediterranean, a single truth is becoming undeniable. Rome does not just fight wars. Rome transforms them. For centuries, battles have been decided by men with swords and spears, by the courage of warriors and the strength of their shields. Cities relied on their walls, kingdoms relied on their champions, and armies relied on the sheer determination of human flesh to hold the line. But Rome was different. Rome believed that war was not just an art of bravery, but an engineering problem. Every campaign was a calculation. Every battlefield was a construction site. And every enemy fortress was simply a puzzle waiting to be solved. Narrator, steady, deliberate. While other nations gloried in heroes, Rome gloried in systems. Their soldiers were not just warriors, they were builders, engineers, mathematicians. And with this mindset, Rome turned weapons into machines and battles into equations. This philosophy created an empire. By the 1st century BCE, Rome had expanded beyond Italy, swallowing Greece, North Africa, Spain, and much of the Mediterranean world. But conquest was never easy. They faced enemies with their own strengths. The cunning Carthaginians with their elephants and naval mastery, the fierce tribes of Gaul with their wild courage and numbers, and the fortified cities of the East with their towering walls. Each opponent brought new challenges, and Rome learned from each one. Imagine the contrast. The Gauls fought with ferocity, relying on brute strength, sheer numbers, and an unbreakable will to charge headlong into battle. But they lacked discipline, and their weapons were crude compared to Rome's refined steel. The Greeks had once perfected the art of war, with phalanxes, cavalry, and siege machines of their own. Yet by the time Rome rose, Greece was fractured, rich in culture, philosophy, and science, but weakened politically, ripe for conquest. Eastern kingdoms like the Seleucids and later the Parthians wielded wealth, cavalry, and fortified cities. They were not easily cowed, but their defenses, high walls, thick gates, would soon discover that Rome could bring its own answer in wood, iron, and sinew. Rome thrived not by outmatching every enemy in raw talent, but by absorbing their best ideas, stripping them of weaknesses, and turning them into Roman strengths. And nothing embodied this more than the Ballista. At stake in these wars was more than territory. If Rome lost, it wasn't just land. It was the image of invincibility. For the Romans, war was a matter of honor, survival, and destiny. Every defeat threatened to unravel their aura of inevitability, to inspire rebellion in the provinces, to embolden rival powers. Victory meant wealth, slaves, and glory. But defeat? Defeat meant cracks in the armor of empire. And their enemies knew it. A single lost battle could embolden entire regions to rise up. A single failed siege could cost months of campaigning, drain the treasury, and bleed Rome's legions dry. This was the high-stakes world into which the Ballista emerged. Narrator, rising intensity, the Ballista was not born in a vacuum. It was born because Rome could not afford to lose. Every tool, every weapon, every machine was forged in the crucible of necessity. And when Rome faced walls too high, armies too numerous, and courage too fierce, they unleashed the Ballista. Picture the scene once more. An enemy fortress looming over a valley, its defenders taunting from behind thick walls. In earlier ages, such a stronghold might withstand siege for years, its gates unbroken, its warriors safe behind stone. But against Rome, the defenders would hear a new sound, the groaning tension of twisted sinew, the grinding wood of a siege frame, the thunder of a projectile launched with mechanical precision. Suddenly, their walls no longer seemed unbreakable. Their courage began to waver. The Ballista was more than a weapon. It was the storm on the horizon, the thunder before the lightning. Its arrival meant the enemy's defenses would not hold, that even distance and fortifications could not protect them. And when the machine was rolled into position, everyone, Romans and enemies alike, knew that the real battle was about to begin. Narrator, closing, foreshadowing, Rome had mastered the art of breaking men. But now, They had mastered the art of breaking armies, cities, and walls themselves. And once the ballista entered the field, the storm was inevitable. The Mediterranean was never still. It was a sea of alliances and betrayals, kingdoms rising and falling like the tides. And into this storm, Rome marched with one constant truth: expansion was survival. Politics and rivalries. The Senate in Rome argued endlessly about wealth, about land, about the loyalty of generals who grew too powerful. Rival families feuded for influence, each seeking to use war as a stepping stone to glory. Consuls and proconsuls sought victories not only for the Republic, but for themselves. Every campaign was as much about politics as it was about conquest, and Rome's enemies knew this. Kings and tribal chieftains watched carefully, hoping to exploit division in the Roman ranks. A delayed army, a rival general's jealousy, even a poorly timed Senate decree could mean weakness, a crack to be struck. But Rome was ruthless. When unity faltered, discipline held. The legions still marched. Alliances and foes across the Alps, the Gallic tribes swore vengeance. To the east, the Seleucid dynasty clung to its fading empire. Its wealth poured into towering fortifications and mercenary armies. Carthage, though broken by Hannibal's defeat, still smoldered with resentment. And beyond the desert horizons, the Parthians waited, their horse archers like ghosts on the steppe, each power prepared in its own way. The Gauls with wild feasts before battle, painting their skin in blue woad and calling on their gods. The eastern kings with endless stone walls, sure that no army could breach them. The desert empires with cavalry swifter than the Roman eye could follow. But none of them understood how Rome had changed. Rome no longer relied solely on swords and spears. Rome had machines. The terrain and environment, the world these armies fought in, was as much an enemy as any soldier. The Mediterranean sun could scorch a man in his armor, drying his lips, making the steel feel like fire. Winter rains turned roads into rivers of mud, dragging down carts and drowning the hooves of horses. In the east, deserts stretched for days without water. In Gaul, forests loomed dark and endless, where ambushes waited behind every tree. Every campaign was a march against the earth itself. Armies struggled across mountains, cut down forests, built bridges over roaring rivers. Yet the Romans thrived in this. The harsher the terrain, the greater their triumph when they conquered it. And behind them always came the engineers. Roads were paved, camps were fortified, siege engines rolled on wheels across mud and stone. Machines like the ballista were not hindered by terrain. They were carried with discipline, piece by piece, until they were ready to unleash their fury. Preparations and morale in enemy camps. Morale often rose with bravado. Warriors boasted of victories to come, sang songs around fires, and trusted in their gods. Their leaders made promises that their walls would hold, that their courage would be enough. In the Roman camp, the atmosphere was different. Silence, drills, orders repeated until every man could execute them in his sleep. Generals did not make promises of gods or luck. They relied on precision, discipline, and the machines waiting in their arsenal. The legions sharpened their swords, repaired their armor, built their siege ramps plank by plank. And in the shadows of the camp, engineers wound the sinew of the ballista tighter, tested the weight of the stones, adjusted the arms of the machine until every creak was perfect. Rome prepared not with hope. Rome prepared with certainty. Mistakes and suspense, but even Rome was not flawless. Generals underestimated their foes. Some dismissed the wild courage of the Gauls as madness, only to be caught off guard by sudden charges. Others scoffed at the strength of eastern walls, only to find themselves bogged down in sieges that drained their supplies. Politics in the Senate sometimes delayed reinforcements. Rivals sabotaged one another's reputations. And in those moments, enemies believed they had a chance. That Rome could be beaten, that their walls were tall enough, that their courage would outlast Roman steel. But those hopes were illusions, because even as fear and doubt crept into the Roman camp, The Ballista stood waiting, silent, motionless, like a predator ready to strike. Narrator, short, sharp sentences, suspenseful. The armies gathered. Walls rose. Spears bristled. The air thickened with the smell of oil and sweat. Everyone knew the clash was coming. And still, they did not know the storm Rome carried with it. The storm of wood, iron, and sinew. The camera lingers on the horizon. Dust clouds rise where the enemy gathers. In the Roman camp, a machine creaks as ropes tighten. Soldiers fall silent. The battlefield waits. Narrator, final foreshadowing. The enemy believed they were ready. They thought their courage, their walls, their numbers would protect them. But soon, they would learn what it meant to stand against Rome's deadliest machine. Dawn. Mist clings to the valley floor, curling around the legs of two vast armies staring across the plain. On one side, the defenders stand behind towering walls of stone, banners fluttering, spears jutting like a forest of iron. On the other, the disciplined ranks of Rome. Tens of thousands of legionaries, shields gleaming, scarlet standards snapping in wind. The silence is suffocating. Then a single horn blasts. The battle begins. Step by step, formations and tactics, the defenders roar from the walls, hurling javelins and stones down on the advancing Romans. Their archers unleash a black storm of arrows, blotting out the rising sun. The Romans do not break stride. Shields lock, forming the testudo, the tortoise formation, a shell of wood and iron that advances step by steady step. Behind them, engineers heave massive ropes. The ballistae creak, their arms drawn back, bolts glistening with the dew of the morning. The order is given. The first volley shrieks through the air. Bolts the length of spears slam into the walls and ranks of defenders. One soldier is lifted from his feet, pinned against stone like an insect on a board. Another bolt tears through two men at once, their shields splintering, their bodies collapsing in grotesque unison. Panic ripples across the wall. This is not ordinary fire. This is death delivered with mechanical precision. Chaos and ambush. The defenders try to counter. Gates open, and cavalry charges out in a desperate sally, hoping to smash into Roman lines before the siege engines tighten their grip. Horses thunder across the mud. Spears lower. For a moment, it looks as though the Roman formation will break. Then, another command. Ballistae swing on their wooden frames. The machines pivot, groaning, then release. Bolts tear into the cavalry charge. Horses scream. Riders are hurled into the dirt, impaled mid-gallop. The charge falters, then collapses into chaos. Those who survive wheel their mounts, fleeing back to the gates. But Rome does not relent. Catapults hurl stones into the walls, and ladders rise like iron teeth against the fortress. Rain and fire-dark clouds roll overhead. The first drops of rain strike steel and stone. Soon, the battlefield is a storm of mud and blood. Fires erupt where flaming arrows strike wooden towers. Smoke mixes with rain, choking soldiers as they fight blindly in the haze. Defenders pour boiling oil from the walls, screaming as it sears flesh. Roman soldiers cry out, shields slipping in their blistered hands. But the formation closes again. Step by step, the tortoise advances, unstoppable, mechanical. Human drama on the walls. A young commander rallies his men. His voice cuts through the storm. Hold. The gods are with us. These walls have never fallen. His soldiers cheer, clinging to hope. But then a thunderous crack. A ballista bolt smashes through the parapet, showering them with stone and splinters. The commander staggers, his armor dented, his courage shattered. Elsewhere, betrayal brews. A gatekeeper, promised gold by the Romans, slips a hidden signal. A torch flares in the darkness beneath the walls. The Romans see it. They press harder, focusing their fire. The defenders never realize one of their own has already doomed them. Still, there are moments of courage. A handful of warriors stand atop a breached tower, refusing to retreat. They fight like lions, cutting down any Roman who climbs the ladder. One by one, they fall, but their stand buys precious minutes for their families to flee deeper into the city. Their sacrifice is carved into the memory of the survivors. Fast-paced chaos, the battlefield spirals into madness. Arrows whistle, stones crash, men slip in the mud, trampled by comrades. Trumpets blare through the smoke, each signal lost in the screams. Somewhere, a Roman cohort is caught in an ambush as defenders burst from a hidden tunnel. Swords clash in the rain. For a moment, the legion wavers. Then, the Ballistae turn again. Their bolts carve open the ambush, ripping through ranks, silencing the defiant charge in a heartbeat. The Romans surge forward. The wall is breached. Narrateur, urgent, cinématique was crumble. Courage shatters. The defenders' songs are drowned in the thunder of machines. And still, the Ballista fires again and again until the battlefield itself is silenced. The storm is broken. The defenders scatter into alleys, some surrendering, others cut down as they flee. The city is no longer theirs. It belongs to Rome. The battlefield is quiet again. Smoke rises from the shattered gates. The ground is slick with rain and blood. Broken shields lie scattered in the mud, mingling with shattered stone and splintered bolts. The cries of the dying echo faintly, fading into the night. The defenders are gone. Some lie in heaps where the walls fell. Others are dragged in chains, their eyes hollow, their spirit broken. Those who survived the storm of iron and sinew now face a harsher fate: slavery, exile, or execution. Families are torn apart, leaders paraded in humiliation through the Roman camp. The city itself is transformed. Once proud towers now stand cracked and smoking. Streets echo with the tramp of Roman boots as the legions seize grain stores, treasure, and captives. What was once a free city is now a possession of Rome, another name added to the ever-growing list of territories beneath the eagle's shadow. Immediate consequences: casualties are staggering. Thousands lie dead in the ruins of the breach. Entire units of defenders have been annihilated, their courage meaningless against the crushing precision of Roman machines. The city's rulers, once confident in their walls, are now prisoners. Some are executed as examples. Others, if they are lucky, are sent to Rome as trophies, paraded in triumph behind the victorious general's chariot. The balance of power shifts instantly. Neighboring states, who once dared to resist, look on in horror. They see not only the fall of the city, but the method of its destruction. They whisper of the machines, of bolts that pierce men like paper, of walls reduced to rubble. Fear spreads faster than legions ever could. Many choose submission without a fight, swearing loyalty to Rome to avoid the same fate. Long-term legacy: the legacy of the Ballista is more than just the ruin of cities. It is psychological. Rome did not need to fight every enemy. Sometimes the mere presence of siege engines was enough to win wars before they began. The Ballista became a symbol of inevitability. Politically, it reinforced Rome's image as an unstoppable power. Leaders who had once dared to challenge Rome now bent the knee, calculating that resistance meant annihilation. Culturally, the Ballista entered legend. Stories spread among Rome's enemies of giant crossbows that could split men in half, of stone throwers that toppled towers in a single strike. Whether exaggerated or not, the fear was real, and fear is a weapon more powerful than steel. Globally, the principle Rome embodied, that war was as much about machines and engineering as about courage, echoed through history. Future empires would learn the same lesson. Siege warfare, artillery, psychological dominance, all of it traced back to Rome's cold efficiency. The Ballista was not the end of innovation, but a beginning. What if? But imagine, for a moment, if the defenders had held. What if the gates had remained closed? What if the cavalry charge had broken the Roman lines before the Ballista could be unleashed? What if betrayal had never cracked the fortress from within? Had Rome been beaten back, even once, the illusion of invincibility might have shattered. Other cities might have resisted. Rebellions might have multiplied. Enemies might have dared to strike harder, knowing that Rome could bleed. History itself might have turned. Without its aura of inevitability, Without its machines to terrify and crush resistance, Rome's conquest could have slowed. The empire that once spanned continents might have remained a Mediterranean power. Formidable, yes, but not eternal. But history is not written in what-ifs. It is written in iron, wood, and sinew, in machines like the Ballista that decided the fate of nations. Narrator, soft, reflective, the Ballista was more than a weapon. It was a message carved into stone and blood, that Rome would not be denied, that walls, courage, even the will of gods were powerless against Roman engineering. And as the smoke cleared and the city lay silent, one truth echoed across the world. To stand against Rome was to stand against inevitability itself. The battlefield is silent now. The smoke has cleared, the walls are broken, the blood has dried into the mud. Where once men screamed and fought for survival, there is only silence, the silence of history echoing across centuries. The Roman Ballista did more than win battles. It reshaped the psychology of war itself. It proved that courage alone was not enough, that even the strongest walls could be reduced to rubble, that even the bravest soldiers could be struck down from afar. It was a weapon of inevitability. Narrator, poetic, reflective, Rome's legions carried more than steel. They carried an idea that war was a science, that victory could be engineered, that empires were not just conquered by men, but by machines. The Ballista embodied that idea. It was not the largest engine of war, nor the most famous, but it was precise, ruthless, terrifying. And in the hands of Roman discipline, it became something more than wood and sinew. It became destiny made visible. The meaning of history when we look back, the Ballista is more than a weapon. It is a symbol of Rome itself. Relentless, calculated, efficient, and merciless. A civilization that did not just fight wars, but redefine them. And yet, there is irony here. For all its power, Rome too would fall. Its machines would rust. Its legions would vanish into memory. But the idea lived on. Every empire that followed, Byzantium, the Ottomans, the kingdoms of Europe, carried Rome's lesson with them. Engineering, precision, the marriage of technology and war. The Ballista was the ancestor of every artillery piece, every cannon, every missile that defines modern warfare. A straight line connects the Roman battlefield to the wars of today. Narrator, somber, cinematic, perhaps that is the true legacy of the Ballista. Not the ruins it left behind, but the world it foreshadowed. A world where machines, not men, decide the fate of nations. Closure and emotional resonance, the story of the Ballista is the story of power itself. How empires rise not only on courage, but on the tools they forge. How fear can be as decisive as steel. And how every invention, no matter how deadly, is born from one simple human truth, the desire to overcome. But it also reminds us of something fragile, that every empire believes itself eternal, that every weapon seems unbeatable until the day it is not. The Ballista once made Rome invincible. Now, it sits silent in museums, a relic of a world long gone. What will be said, centuries from now, of our own machines? YouTube CTA, smooth pivot if you found yourself captivated by this journey into Rome's deadliest weapon. There's more where this came from. History is full of stories like these, moments of brilliance, brutality, and invention that shaped the world we live in today. So if you enjoyed this dive into the secrets of the Roman Ballista, hit that like button. It really helps us bring more stories to life. Subscribe for more cinematic journeys through history's greatest battles and machines. And let me know in the comments, which ancient weapon do you think was the most terrifying? Your thoughts could inspire our next episode. Narrator, final poetic close, fade out. The Romans believed their machines made them invincible. For a time, they were right. But history teaches us that no power lasts forever. What remains is not the empire, but the story. And the Ballista story is one of fear, fire, and inevitability. The screen fades to black. The faint echo of the Ballista's twang lingers, followed by silence. Final flow review hook. 700 words opened with shocking imagery and suspense. Introduced the Ballista as Rome's secret terror. Ended with a cliffhanger question. Intro, 700 words, set the stage with Rome's rise. Contrasted enemies, Gauls, Greeks, Eastern powers. Explained what was at stake, foreshadowed the storm. Build up, 700 words covered politics, alliances, terrain, morale, and preparations. Suspense pacing built tension, with the Ballista looming. Climax, 700 words cinematic step-by-step battle narration. Tactics, chaos, ambushes, fire, rain, betrayal, and last stands. The Ballista's power unleashed. Aftermath, 700 words immediate consequences, casualties, prisoners, city destroyed. Long-term legacy, psychological terror, cultural myths, global impact, plus a reflective what-if, alternate history. Outro, 700 words poetic reflection on meaning, Rome's legacy, connection to modern war, closure with haunting resonance. Then YouTube CTA. Pacing. Each section runs 700 words. Together, that's about 4,200 words total, which translates into roughly 28 to 32 minutes of narrated documentary script. Perfect for a cinematic YouTube episode.